Maya Johnson came into the world on a rainy spring morning in a small town just outside New Orleans. The doctors noticed something wasn't right with her eyes almost immediately. After several tests, they broke the news to her mother, Thelma. Maya had been born with a rare form of congenital blindness. Her eyes, deep brown and beautiful, would never see the colorful world around her. Thelma held her baby girl close that night, rocking her gently as she hummed an old gospel song her own grandmother used to sing. She promised Maya that blindness would never define her life. "You're going to find your own way to see this world, baby girl," she whispered. "And I'll be right beside you every step." Life wasn't easy for a single mother raising a blind child. Thelma worked 2 jobs, mornings at a local diner and evenings cleaning offices downtown. Their small house at the end of Oak Street wasn't much, but Thelma made sure it was always filled with sounds and smells to help Maya create her own picture of the world. The radio played constantly, gospel on Sunday mornings, jazz in the afternoons, and classic soul music when Thelma cooked dinner. By the time Maya was 3, something unusual began to happen. Whenever a song played on the radio, she would hum along perfectly even after hearing it just once. At first, Thelma thought it was just a child's natural mimicry. But when Maya started recreating complicated melodies days after hearing them, she realized her daughter had a special gift. "Mama, can I hear the rain song again?" Maya would ask, referring to a jazz piece that had played on the radio the previous week. When Thelma couldn't find it, Maya would simply hum the entire melody, never missing a note. Their neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, watched Maya a few days each week while Thelma worked. One afternoon when Maya was nearly 4, Mrs. Wilson called Thelma at the diner, her voice trembling with excitement. "You need to come home when you can, Thelma. You need to see what your girl can do." That evening, Mrs. Wilson led them to her old upright piano that sat largely unused in her living room. She gently placed Maya on the bench and nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, honey. Show your mama what you showed me." Maya's small fingers found the keys and she began to play, not random notes or childish plunking, but the clear, recognizable melody of the gospel song that had played on the radio that morning. Her tiny hands stretched to reach the keys, sometimes hitting 2 at once when she needed just one, but the melody was unmistakable. Thelma's hand flew to her mouth. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "How did you learn to do that, baby?" Maya just shrugged, her unseeing eyes staring straight ahead. "I can feel where the music is, Mama. It's like touching colors." From that day forward, Mrs. Wilson offered to let Maya play her piano whenever she wanted. The little girl spent hours exploring the instrument, discovering how different keys created different sounds, how pressing softly or firmly changed the feeling of the music. She couldn't read sheet music or take formal lessons, but her ears became her teachers. When Maya turned 6, it was time for school. The local public school wasn't equipped for students with special needs, but a teacher there, Ms. Dupree, took a special interest in Maya. She arranged for the girl to attend regular classes with extra help, fighting against administrators who suggested sending her to a special school 2 hours away. "This child belongs in her community," Ms. Dupree insisted, "and she has a gift that needs nurturing." School was hard for Maya. The other children were curious but sometimes cruel in the way children can be without meaning to. They asked blunt questions about her blindness or played tricks like moving her things when she wasn't around. Maya learned to keep to herself, finding refuge in the music room during lunch breaks where an old piano sat mostly forgotten. The music teacher, Mr. Thomas, found her there one afternoon, playing a complicated piece he recognized from a classical radio program. "Who taught you to play like that, Maya?" he asked, astonished. "Nobody taught me," she answered simply. "I just listen and then I find the sounds on the keys." Mr. Thomas sat beside her on the bench. "Would you like to learn more? There are techniques I could show you that might help." Maya nodded eagerly, and so began her first informal music lessons. Mr. Thomas wasn't trained to teach blind students, but he adapted, using Maya's strong sense of touch and extraordinary memory to help her understand concepts like scales and chords. By the time she was 9, Maya's reputation had spread throughout their small community. The local church, where Thelma had been a lifelong member, invited Maya to play during Sunday services. The first time she sat at the old church piano, Maya was so nervous her hands trembled. But the moment her fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. The music flowed through her, filling the small wooden church with sounds so pure and moving that several elderly members later claimed they felt the presence of angels. "That child doesn't just play music," Deacon Brown said after the service. "She speaks through it, like her hands are telling stories her voice can't tell." The church became Maya's second home. After school, while Thelma worked, Maya would practice on the church piano for hours. The pastor gave her a key so she could come and go as needed, and church members took turns checking on her, often bringing snacks or simply sitting in the pews, eyes closed, listening to the beautiful sounds she created. By 12, Maya had developed her own unique style of playing. Without the ability to read music or watch others play, she created her own techniques. Her fingers moved differently across the keys, sometimes in ways that made traditional pianists shake their heads. But no one could deny the beauty of what she produced. She felt the vibrations through the piano, sometimes laying her cheek against the wood to better understand how the sounds connected and moved together. Life at school remained challenging. As Maya and her classmates moved into their teen years, the gap between her and the others seemed to widen. While girls her age talked about clothes, movies, and crushes, Maya remained in her world of sounds and music. There was one girl, Desiree, who made efforts to include Maya. She'd describe movies scene by scene, read fashion magazines aloud, and walk with Maya between classes. "You've got to hear this new song," she'd say, sharing her earbuds with Maya, who would listen once and then play it perfectly on the piano later that day. "How do you do that?" Desiree would ask, amazed. Maya would just smile and shrug. "Music makes more sense to me than people do sometimes." When Maya turned 15, tragedy struck. The old church caught fire one night after a faulty electrical system sparked in the back office. No one was hurt, but the building was destroyed, including the piano that had been Maya's sanctuary for years. The community rallied, holding services in the school gymnasium while plans for rebuilding began. But Maya felt lost without her piano. The school instrument wasn't the same, it was newer, with a different touch and sound. And she couldn't spend hours there as she had at the church. Seeing her daughter's depression, Thelma took on a third job cleaning houses on weekends. After 6 months of extra work, she surprised Maya with an upright piano she'd bought secondhand from a family leaving town. "It's not fancy," Thelma apologized as she guided Maya's hands over the scratched wood. "And it needs tuning something awful." But Maya was overjoyed. She spent days getting to know every inch of the instrument, learning its particular sounds and quirks. The slightly sticky E-flat key, the deep resonance of the lower register, the bright, almost tinkling quality of the highest notes. Even after it was professionally tuned, the piano had character, flaws and beauty marks that made it unique, just like its owner. Word of Maya's talent continued to spread. She was invited to play at community events, school functions, and even at a wedding for one of Thelma's diner customers. But it was at church where her gift truly shone. The congregation had rebuilt, installing a new piano that the manufacturer had sold to them at cost after hearing about Maya. The first Sunday in the new building, Maya played a piece she had composed herself. She called it "Rising from Ashes," and as her fingers danced across the keys, the music told the story of loss, perseverance, and rebirth that the congregation had lived through. There wasn't a dry eye in the church when she finished. "God may have taken her sight," Reverend Jackson said afterward, "but he gave her a vision more powerful than eyes could ever provide." As her 16th birthday approached, Maya's world was small but rich, filled with music, the love of her mother, the support of her church, and the occasional friendship. She had no way of knowing that her life was about to change dramatically, that her small-town talent would soon face its greatest challenge, or that a cruel encounter with a famous pianist would become the catalyst for a journey no one could have imagined. The news about the Gulf Coast Classical Music Festival reached their small town, like a whisper that grew louder with each telling. Posters went up in the music store window, and Mr. Thomas, Maya's informal mentor, couldn't stop talking about it during their sessions. "Victor Keller will be there," he said, his voice filled with awe. "One of the greatest pianists of our time." Maya nodded politely, though the name meant little to her. At 16, her musical education had been pieced together through public radio programs, borrowed CDs from the library, and whatever guidance Mr. Thomas could provide. The classical music world, with its famous performers and prestigious competitions, existed in a universe far from her small-town reality. But that evening, When Mr. Thomas played a recording of Keller performing Chopin, Maya sat perfectly still, her unseeing eyes wide, as if trying to absorb every note through her entire body. "His touch," she whispered when the piece ended. "It's like he's not just playing the piano. He's having a conversation with it." Mr. Thomas smiled. "That's exactly right, Maya. That's what makes him special." Over the next few weeks, Maya borrowed every Victor Keller recording she could find. She listened to them constantly, sometimes staying up until Thelma would knock on her door at midnight. "Baby, you need to sleep," her mother would say. "Just one more time." "Mama, I'm trying to understand how he makes the music breathe like that." The Gulf Coast Festival was being held in New Orleans, just an hour's drive away. The tickets were expensive, far beyond what Thelma could afford on her waitress salary. But when Mr. Thomas mentioned that Keller would be conducting a master class for young pianists, something unusual happened at the next church service. Reverend Jackson stood at the pulpit after Maya's Sunday performance and cleared his throat. "Brothers and sisters, we all know that God blessed our congregation with a special gift in young Maya Johnson. For years we've watched her talent grow like a mighty oak from a tiny seed." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the church. Now there's an opportunity for Maya to learn from one of the greatest pianists in the world, right here in New Orleans next month. The Reverend explained about the festival and the master class. "I'm proposing we take up a special collection. Let's send our Maya to this festival. Let's give her a chance to grow even more." By the end of the service, the congregation had raised enough money for festival tickets, master class registration, and even a new dress for Maya to wear. Thelma tried to refuse such generosity, but the church members insisted. "Your girl's gift doesn't belong just to you or even just to her," Deacon Brown said gently. "It belongs to all of us because it comes from above. We're just doing our part to help it grow." As the festival approached, Maya grew increasingly nervous. She practiced harder than ever, often until her fingers cramped and Thelma had to massage them with warm oil before bed. She selected a Beethoven sonata for the master class, challenging enough to showcase her abilities but not so difficult that she might stumble under pressure. "What if he doesn't think I'm good enough?" Maya asked her mother the night before the festival. Thelma sat on the edge of Maya's bed, stroking her daughter's curly hair. "Baby, your music comes from a place deeper than training or technique. It comes from your soul. No one can take that away from you, not even Victor Keller." The festival was overwhelming from the moment they arrived. The crowd was larger and noisier than any Maya had experienced before. She clung tightly to her mother's arm as they navigated the unfamiliar space. "There are so many people," she whispered, her free hand clutching the folded white cane she rarely needed to use at home, where she knew every inch of her surroundings. "It's okay, baby," Thelma reassured her. "I'm right here." They found their seats for Keller's evening performance. When the lights dimmed and the famous pianist walked onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause. Maya couldn't see him, of course, but she felt the electricity in the air, the collective anticipation of something extraordinary about to happen. Then he began to play. For the next 2 hours, Maya sat motionless, barely breathing, as Keller's music washed over her. His performance was everything she'd heard in the recordings and more, passionate yet precise, powerful yet delicate. Tears streamed down her face, though she made no sound. When the final notes faded and the audience rose in a standing ovation, Maya remained seated, too overwhelmed to move. Beside her, Thelma wiped away her own tears. "Now I understand," Maya whispered. The master class was scheduled for the following morning. 20 young pianists had been selected to perform and receive feedback from the master himself. Most were conservatory students with years of formal training. Maya was the last to be added to the list, after Mr. Thomas had made several passionate phone calls to the organizers. The room was smaller than the concert hall, but still large enough to seat 100 people, mostly parents, teachers, and other students eager to glean wisdom from Keller's instruction. Maya sat near the back with Thelma, listening as each student performed and then received Keller's critique. He was not gentle with his feedback. His comments were precise and often cutting, pointing out flaws in technique or interpretation that even Maya's untrained ear couldn't detect. Several students left the piano bench looking shaken. "He's tough," Thelma whispered. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." Maya shook her head. "No, he's right about everything he's saying. I can hear it now that he points it out." As the morning progressed, Maya's anxiety grew. Her palms became sweaty and her heart raced. When the organizer finally called her name, Thelma gave her hand a squeeze. "Remember who you are," she whispered. Maya unfolded her white cane and made her way carefully to the front of the room. A murmur ran through the audience as they realized she was blind. She felt for the piano bench and sat down, taking a moment to find the keys with her fingertips. "What will you be playing for us today?" Keller's voice was deep and carried a slight European accent. "Beethoven's Sonata No. 8 in C minor, the Pathétique," Maya replied, her voice barely audible. "The first movement." There was a pause. "That's quite ambitious," Keller said, his tone unreadable. Maya took a deep breath and began to play. For the first minute, everything went well. Her fingers remembered every note, every dynamic shift. But then, in a particularly difficult passage, she faltered. Her left hand hit a wrong chord, throwing her briefly off balance. She recovered quickly, but her confidence was shaken. The mistake led to another, and then another. She finished the piece, but knew it wasn't her best performance. The room was silent for a long moment. Maya sat perfectly still, waiting. "Young lady," Keller finally said, his voice cold. "Who prepared you for this masterclass?" I mostly prepared myself, sir," Maya answered. "With some help from my teacher at school. And this teacher thought you were ready for a piece of this complexity? With your limitations?" The word hung in the air like a slap. Maya felt her face grow hot with shame. "I can play it better, sir." I was nervous. "Music is not merely about playing notes," Keller interrupted. "It requires a complete understanding of the composer's intentions, something that's conveyed through notation that must be seen and studied." A murmur ran through the room. From somewhere behind her, Maya heard her mother stand up. "She has perfect pitch," Thelma called out. "She learns by ear." Keller sighed loudly. "Learning by ear is fine for folk songs or popular music, perhaps. But classical music requires scholarship, years of technical training, and a deep understanding of musical theory." His chair creaked as he stood up. "I don't mean to be unkind, but this masterclass is meant for serious students of piano. Not for amateurs, however, inspiring their stories might be." The word amateur cut deeper than any other criticism could have. Maya felt tears forming but willed them not to fall. Her hands, still resting on the keys, began to tremble. "I am serious about music," she said quietly. "My dear," Keller replied, his voice softening in a way that somehow made his words even more painful. "Being serious about music means understanding your limitations. How can someone who cannot see sheet music possibly understand Beethoven's complex harmonic structures? How can you interpret what you cannot read?" The room had gone completely silent. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, pity and embarrassment radiating from the audience like heat. "Thank you for your time," she managed to say, her voice surprisingly steady. She stood up, unfolded her cane, and turned to leave the stage. "Wait," Keller said. "I didn't mean to discourage you entirely. There are simpler pieces that might be more appropriate for your situation. Perhaps you could try—" "Thank you, sir," Maya interrupted, unwilling to hear what lesser music he thought she was capable of playing. "But I know what I can do." She made her way back to Thelma, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders and guided her quickly out of the room. Once they were in the hallway, Maya's composure finally broke. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs as Thelma held her. "He didn't even give me a chance," she whispered. "He decided who I was the moment he saw my cane." Thelma's voice was tight with anger. "That man doesn't know the first thing about you, baby. Don't you let him steal your gift." But as they drove home that afternoon, Maya sat silently in the passenger seat, her face turned toward the window. For the first time since she'd discovered the piano, the music inside her had gone quiet. For 3 weeks after the festival, the piano in the Johnson home sat untouched. The sheet music that Thelma had painstakingly collected for Maya over the years gathered dust. The house, once filled with constant melody, fell silent except for the mundane sounds of daily life, the hum of the refrigerator, the dripping faucet Thelma kept meaning to fix, the distant sounds of neighborhood children playing outside. Maya spent most days in her room. She told her mother she had a headache when it was time for Sunday church service. She begged off when Mr. Thomas called about their regular practice sessions. When Desiree came by to check on her, Maya claimed to be too tired for visitors. "This isn't like you," Thelma said one evening, sitting at the edge of Maya's bed. "You've never let anything keep you down for this long." "It's different this time," Maya whispered. "He was right, Mama. I'm just fooling myself. I'm not a real musician. Thelma's voice hardened. Don't you ever say that again. Not in this house. But no amount of encouragement seemed to reach Maya. The spark that had always lit her from within had dimmed to nearly nothing. She went through the motions of each day, eating when food was placed before her, answering when spoken to, but the joy had drained from her face. Thelma was at her wit's end when Reverend Jackson came to visit. He sat in their small living room, his large frame making the worn sofa creak beneath him. She won't even come out to say hello, Thelma confessed. I'm worried, Reverend. I've never seen her like this. The Reverend nodded slowly. The congregation is asking about her. Sunday service doesn't feel the same without Maya's music. He leaned forward. But this isn't just about us missing her playing. The Lord doesn't give gifts like hers just to have them buried. Together, they formulated a plan. The following Sunday, members of the church began to arrive at the Johnson home, one by one. They came bearing casseroles and pies, flower arrangements, and small gifts. By noon, the house was filled with people, their voices raised in conversation and laughter. Maya remained in her room until Deacon Brown's wife began to play the piano. The older woman's arthritic fingers moved slowly across the keys, playing a simple hymn. Then someone began to sing, their voice joined by another, then another. In her darkened bedroom, Maya's head lifted. The music was simple, imperfect, nothing like Victor Keller's flawless performance. Yet there was something in it that called to her, something genuine and heartfelt. Slowly, Maya made her way down the hallway, one hand trailing along the wall. When she reached the living room, the singing faltered as people noticed her presence. The piano stopped. Don't stop, she said softly. Mrs. Brown patted the piano bench beside her. Why don't you come sit with me, child? Maya hesitated, then made her way to the piano. The room held its collective breath as she sat down, her fingers hovering above the keys without touching them. We miss your music, Maya, Reverend Jackson said into the silence. But more than that, we miss the joy it brought you. Maya's fingers trembled. I don't know if I can play anymore. Then just listen with us today, the Reverend said gently. And maybe tomorrow or the next day you'll find your way back. That afternoon, no one pressured Maya to play. The church members shared stories, sang together, and surrounded the girl and her mother with the warmth of community. When they left, the house felt lighter somehow, as if they had taken some of the heaviness with them. That night, long after Thelma had gone to bed, Maya crept to the piano. In the darkness, her fingers found the keys and pressed down, making no sound. She sat there for nearly an hour, feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips, remembering. The following morning, Thelma was startled awake by a sound she hadn't heard in weeks. Maya playing the piano. The melody was halting, uncertain but unmistakably music. Thelma lay in bed, tears streaming down her face, afraid to move lest the spell be broken. Later that day, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen, who taught advanced music theory at the high school. Although Maya had never taken her classes, Mrs. Chen had heard about what happened at the festival from Mr. Thomas. I've been thinking about your daughter, Mrs. Chen told Thelma. I believe I might be able to help her. Mrs. Chen had trained at Juilliard before a wrist injury ended her performance career. She had never taught a blind student before, but she had ideas about how to adapt her methods. Traditional teaching relies too heavily on visual learning, she explained when she visited their home that weekend. But music isn't just seen, it's felt, heard, experienced. Maya was skeptical at first. I tried learning the proper way. It didn't work. The proper way is whatever works for you, Mrs. Chen replied firmly. Victor Keller's way isn't the only way, and so began a new chapter in Maya's musical education. 3 times a week, Mrs. Chen came to the Johnson home after school. She brought with her a radical approach that threw out conventional wisdom about how piano should be taught. Instead of sheet music, Mrs. Chen created raised patterns on cardboard that Maya could feel with her fingertips, representing the structure of musical pieces. She used kitchen timers to help Maya internalize rhythm and tempo. She recorded herself playing passages slowly, then at normal speed, teaching Maya to hear the subtle nuances of dynamics and phrasing. Music theory isn't just about reading notes on a page, Mrs. Chen explained. It's about understanding the mathematical and emotional patterns that make music work. Maya absorbed these lessons like a sponge soaking up water in the desert. For the first time, She was learning the why behind the music she had always played by instinct. "It's like I've been speaking a language without knowing the grammar," she told her mother excitedly after one lesson. "Now I'm starting to understand the rules." Mrs. Chen was equally impressed with her pupil. "She has an extraordinary mind," she told Thelma. "She can hear patterns and structures that take most students years to recognize." Gradually, Maya's confidence began to return. She started playing at church again, though her selections were different now, more complex, more intentional. The congregation noticed the change. "She always played beautifully," Deacon Brown commented to his wife, "but now it's like she understands what she's doing in a whole new way." As summer turned to fall, Maya faced another challenge, her senior year of high school. College had always seemed like a distant, unlikely possibility, given her family's financial situation and her disability. But Mrs. Chen had other ideas. "There are music programs that would be lucky to have you," she insisted. "You need to make a recording to send with applications." Maya shook her head. "After what happened at the festival? Who would want me?" "That was one man's opinion," Mrs. Chen said firmly, "and an ignorant one at that. There are people in the music world who understand that different doesn't mean less." With Mrs. Chen's encouragement, Maya began to prepare a recording. She selected pieces that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth: a Bach prelude, a Chopin nocturne, and an original composition that blended classical structure with the gospel and jazz influences she had grown up with. The recording session took place in the church on a crisp October evening. Mr. Thomas brought professional equipment borrowed from a friend who ran a small recording studio. Mrs. Chen acted as producer, insisting on multiple takes until each piece was perfect. Thelma and Reverend Jackson sat in the back pew, listening in awe as Maya's music filled the sanctuary. "She's come so far," Thelma whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," the Reverend replied. "Sometimes our greatest setbacks prepare us for our greatest victories." When the final recording was complete, Mrs. Chen had it professionally mastered and made copies to send with college applications. She also uploaded it to several music-sharing platforms online. "People need to hear this," she insisted. "Your music deserves an audience." Maya was embarrassed by such promotion. "I'm not trying to be famous," she protested. "This isn't about fame," Mrs. Chen replied. "It's about sharing your gift. It's about showing the Victor Kellers of the world that music belongs to everyone, not just those who fit their narrow definition of what a musician should be." As her senior year progressed, Maya continued to grow as a musician. She developed a system of memorizing complex pieces by breaking them into sections that she associated with physical sensations or emotions. She learned to use the piano's pedals with greater sophistication, creating textures and resonances that added depth to her playing. Most importantly, she reclaimed her joy. The piano was once again her sanctuary, her voice, her way of seeing a world that was otherwise hidden from her. "I was wrong to let him silence me," she told her mother one evening as they sat on the porch swing. "Music isn't about what you can see. It's about what you can feel." Thelma squeezed her daughter's hand. "You always knew that deep down. You just needed to be reminded." Little did either of them know that Maya's journey was just beginning, and that life was about to present an opportunity for her to show the world, and Victor Keller himself, exactly what she was capable of. Spring arrived in Louisiana with its usual riot of colors and scents. Azaleas bloomed in front yards up and down Oak Street, and the air grew thick with humidity. For Maya, now in the final months of her senior year, it was a time of waiting. College applications had been sent out months ago, each accompanied by her recording and passionate letters of recommendation from Mrs. Chen, Mr. Thomas, and Reverend Jackson. "Any news today?" became Thelma's daily question as she returned from work, her voice trying to sound casual, though Maya could hear the tension underneath. The acceptances began to arrive in April, small scholarships from state schools, a few rejections from more prestigious programs, and one surprising offer from a conservatory in Chicago that wanted to interview her in person. "Chicago?" Thelma repeated when Maya read her the letter. "That's so far away." "I probably won't get in anyway," Maya said, though a small part of her dared to hope. "The competition will be fierce." Life continued its regular rhythms as Maya prepared for her interview. She practiced daily, refining the pieces she would play. Mrs. Chen came by more often, offering advice and encouragement. "You need to perform somewhere before the interview," Mrs. Chen said one afternoon, "somewhere with an audience. It's different from playing in your living room." The perfect opportunity arrived a week later when the town announced its annual spring festival. The event was mostly a small-town affair. Local bands, food vendors, arts and crafts booths set up in the park. But this year, the organizers were trying something new, a talent showcase on Saturday evening. "You should sign up," Mr. Thomas urged during their weekly session. "It would be good practice for your interview." Maya hesitated. "I don't know. What if people don't like it?" "Since when do you play for other people's approval?" Mr. Thomas asked gently. "You play because the music lives in you and needs to come out." Those words stayed with Maya for days, echoing in her mind as she practiced. Finally, she asked her mother to call the festival organizers and add her name to the performer list. The night of the showcase was warm and clear. The stage had been set up in the park's central pavilion, with rows of folding chairs arranged before it. People wandered among food stalls and craft booths, the air filled with the scent of fried foods and the sounds of laughter and conversation. Maya waited backstage, nervously running her fingers over the keys of the upright piano the organizers had provided. It wasn't a great instrument, slightly out of tune and with a few sticky keys, but she had practiced on worse. "You're going to be wonderful," Thelma reassured her, adjusting the collar of Maya's new blue dress, a splurge they'd justified as necessary for college interviews. The showcase began with the usual small-town talent. Teenage rock band playing slightly off-key covers, a pair of sisters singing a country duet, a surprisingly good jazz saxophonist who taught math at the high school. The audience was generous with their applause, the atmosphere warm and supportive. When it was Maya's turn, a hush fell over the crowd as Mr. Thomas helped her to the piano. Many in the audience knew her story, both her remarkable gift and the crushing experience at the festival the previous year. "Tonight," the MC announced, "we have our very own musical prodigy, Maya Johnson, performing an original composition she calls Finding My Way Back." Maya took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The piece started simply with a melody that carried a hint of sadness. Then it built, layer upon layer, incorporating elements of classical structure, gospel harmonies, and jazz improvisation. It was the story of her journey, translated into music, the joy of discovery, the pain of rejection, the struggle to reclaim her voice. As she played, the chattering crowd grew silent. People who had been wandering between booths stopped to listen. Even the food vendors paused in their work, drawn by the extraordinary sounds coming from the pavilion. What Maya couldn't see was the man standing at the back of the crowd, holding up his phone to record her performance. Luis Valdez was a music producer from New Orleans who had grown up in their town and returned for the weekend to visit his parents. He had come to the festival for the food and nostalgia, not expecting to discover anything remarkable. But as Maya's music washed over him, he stood transfixed, instinctively raising his phone to capture the moment. Here, in this small-town park, was something genuinely extraordinary. A blind teenage girl playing with more soul and technical skill than many professionals he worked with. When Maya finished, the silence held for 3 heartbeats before the audience erupted in applause. She smiled shyly, nodded her thanks, and made her way carefully back to where Thelma waited with open arms. "That was beautiful, baby," Thelma whispered, hugging her daughter tightly. "I'm so proud of you." Neither of them noticed Luis uploading the video to his social media accounts before approaching them. "Excuse me," he said, extending his hand to Thelma. "I'm Luis Valdez. I work in the music industry in New Orleans, and I just recorded your daughter's performance. I hope that's okay." Thelma looked at him warily. "What are you planning to do with it?" "Share it if you'll allow me. People need to hear this. She's incredible." Over the next week, Luis's video began to circulate online. It was shared by musicians, disability advocates, and ordinary people moved by the power of Maya's playing. Comments poured in from around the country, then from overseas as the video was picked up by larger accounts. "Who is this amazing young woman? This brought me to tears. Pure talent. Someone get her a recording contract." Maya was oblivious to her growing fame until Desiree burst into the Johnson home one afternoon, breathless with excitement. "Maya, you're all over the internet!" "Over 2 million views." 2 million what?" Maya asked, confused. Desiree tried to explain about the video, the shares, the comments, but it all seemed unreal to Maya, who had never been particularly interested in social media. "Does this mean I'm famous?" she asked her mother later, sounding more worried than excited. "I don't know about famous," Thelma replied carefully, "but people are certainly noticing your gift now." The call came 3 days later. Thelma answered the phone to find a woman named Claire Walsh on the line, identifying herself as the organizer of a charity benefit concert in New Orleans. "We're raising money for music education in underserved communities," Claire explained. "Our opening act just canceled due to illness, and we need someone to perform a 15-minute set before our headliner. I saw the video of your daughter and was blown away." Thelma's hand tightened on the receiver. "When is this concert?" "This Saturday evening at the Sanger Theater." "This Saturday? That's only 3 days away." "I know it's short notice," Claire admitted, "but we would pay for transportation and accommodations plus a small honorarium. It would be a wonderful opportunity for Maya to perform on a professional stage." Thelma promised to discuss it with Maya and call back. When she explained the situation, Maya's first reaction was panic. "I can't do that. Playing in the park for neighbors is one thing, but a real concert hall? In front of strangers?" "You don't have to," Thelma assured her. "We can say no." Maya paced the small living room, her fingers tapping anxiously against her thigh as if playing an invisible piano. "Who's the headliner?" she asked suddenly. Thelma hesitated. Claire mentioned it was a classical pianist, someone called Victor Keller. Maya froze mid-step. "Victor Keller?" "Yes, does that make a difference?" Maya sank onto the piano bench, her mind racing. The man who had humiliated her, who had dismissed her as an amateur with limitations, would be performing right after her. The thought was terrifying. "I can't do it," she whispered. Then more firmly, "I won't do it." That evening, Mrs. Chen came over after Thelma called her in desperation. The music teacher listened as Maya explained her fears. "Of course you're scared," Mrs. Chen said when Maya finished. "Anyone would be. But consider this, a year ago you let Victor Keller silence your music. Are you going to let him do it again?" "It's not about him," Maya protested. "It's about me not being ready for something this big." "Isn't it about both?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. "Yes, it's a big opportunity that would make anyone nervous. But I think part of you wants to show him he was wrong about you." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "What if I fail again? What if I make mistakes?" "Then you make mistakes," Mrs. Chen said simply. "Everyone does, even Victor Keller. The question is whether you'll let the fear of mistakes keep you from playing at all." By the time Mrs. Chen left, Maya had made her decision. Thelma called Claire back and accepted the invitation. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Maya selected 3 pieces for her set: a classical etude to showcase her technique, a jazz standard to display her versatility, and her original composition that had captivated the internet. Saturday arrived too quickly. The drive to New Orleans felt both endless and too short. At the theater, an assistant met them at the stage door and led them through a maze of hallways to a small dressing room. "The show starts at 8 Xiao. You'll go on first for 15 minutes, followed by a brief intermission, and then Mr. Keller will perform," the assistant explained. "There's a reception afterward for performers and VIP ticket holders." Left alone, Maya sat nervously picking at the sequins on the sleeve of her performance dress. Another splurge, this one funded by a collection taken up by the church when they heard about the concert. "What if he recognizes me?" she asked. Thelma, arranging Maya's hair, snorted. "That man meets hundreds of students. He probably won't even remember." Sure enough, when Victor Keller arrived at the theater, he passed by Maya in the hallway without a second glance. Later, during a brief meeting of all performers, he nodded distractedly when Claire introduced them. "Maya Johnson, our opening act. She's a remarkable young pianist." "Yes, lovely," Keller replied, clearly preoccupied with his own performance preparations. As the minutes ticked down to showtime, Maya sat in her dressing room, hands folded in her lap, taking deep breaths. The assistant knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Johnson." Maya stood, smoothing her dress. "I'm ready." Thelma hugged her tightly. "Remember what Reverend Jackson always says, let your light shine." Maya smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over her. "It's time to shine, then." As she was led toward the stage, she could hear the murmur of the audience beyond the curtain, hundreds of people waiting to hear her play. Among them, though she didn't know it yet, was the man who had once told her she could never truly understand music. But that didn't matter now. As her fingers touched the keys of the magnificent grand piano center stage, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not even determination, but a profound sense of homecoming. Whatever happened next, she was exactly where she belonged. The Saenger Theater hummed with anticipation. Nearly every seat was filled, the audience a mix of wealthy donors in evening wear and music lovers who had scraped together the ticket price to hear Victor Keller perform. Few paid much attention to the program notes about the opening act, a young pianist from a small Louisiana town. Backstage, Claire Walsh gave Maya's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "The piano is positioned center stage. I'll walk you out there myself." Maya nodded, her hands clasped tightly together to hide their trembling. She could hear the audience through the heavy curtain, the rustle of programs, scattered coughs, murmured conversations. So many people, so many ears waiting to judge her. "Ladies and gentlemen," an announcer's voice boomed through the theater. "The New Orleans Music Education Foundation welcomes you to tonight's benefit concert. Before our main performance by the renowned Victor Keller, we are pleased to present a special opening performance by a remarkable young talent, Miss Maya Johnson." Polite applause rippled through the audience as Claire guided Maya onto the stage. The spotlight felt warm on her face as she made her way to the piano. Her white cane tapped softly against the polished floor, the sound seemingly amplified in the hushed theater. Maya found the bench, adjusted it slightly, and sat down. Her fingers found the keys, familiarizing themselves with this new instrument, a concert grand piano with a touch far more responsive than any she had played before. In the wings, Thelma watched, one hand pressed against her mouth, silently praying for her daughter. Mrs. Chen stood nearby, her usual composed expression replaced by one of nervous anticipation. Maya took a deep breath and began with her first piece, Chopin's Etude op. 10, or 12, known as the Revolutionary Etude. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with a precision that belied her years, attacking the challenging runs with confidence. The piece was a bold choice, technically demanding and emotionally intense. As she played, Maya felt the initial nervousness fall away, replaced by a deep focus that narrowed her world down to just her hands and the keys beneath them. When the final chords of the etude faded, there was a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted in applause. Maya smiled slightly, inclining her head in acknowledgement. Without pausing for too long, she transitioned to her second piece, her own arrangement of Gershwin's Summertime. Here she departed from the written music, infusing the familiar melody with blues inflections and gospel harmonies that spoke of her southern roots. Her body swayed slightly as she played, lost in the music, her expression one of pure joy. In the audience, people leaned forward in their seats. This was not the polite, restrained performance they had expected from an opening act. This was something authentic and alive. Backstage, Victor Keller paused in his pre-performance routine, his attention caught by the sounds coming from the stage. Something about the playing style stirred a memory. He stepped closer to the wings, watching the young blind woman at the piano with growing interest. As Maya's Summertime drew to a close, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. She took a moment to collect herself, knowing that her final piece would be the most important. Her original composition, Finding My Way Back. "For my final piece," she said, speaking for the first time, her voice soft but clear, "I'd like to play something I wrote about learning to believe in yourself when others don't." She paused, then added, "About finding your own voice when the world tries to silence it." In the wings, Keller's brow furrowed. There was something increasingly familiar about this young woman. Had they met before? Maya's fingers touched the keys once more, drawing out the first delicate notes of her composition. The piece began softly, almost hesitantly, a simple melody that evoked questions, seeking. Then it began to build, layer upon layer, incorporating elements from different musical traditions. Classical structure gave way to jazz-like improvisations, which in turn melded with gospel chord progressions and blues rhythms. The music told Maya's story more eloquently than words ever could. The joy of discovering her gift, the devastation of being told she wasn't good enough, the struggle to reclaim her confidence, and finally, the triumph of embracing her unique musical voice. It was technically impressive, but, more importantly, emotionally authentic. Every note rang with truth. In the audience, people sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Some had tears streaming down their faces, moved by the raw emotion in the music. Others sat with eyes closed, completely absorbed in the sound. Victor Keller stood frozen in the wings, recognition finally dawning on his face. He remembered now, the master class, the blind girl with ambitions beyond her training, his own dismissive words. Watching her now, transformed from that nervous student into this confident artist, he felt a complex mix of emotions, admiration tinged with shame. As Maya's piece built toward its climax, her hands moved across the keyboard with absolute assurance, drawing sounds from the piano that seemed impossible, thunderous bass notes against delicate high melodies, complex harmonies that should have clashed but somehow created something transcendent. The final section of the piece was a revelation, a soaring melody that spoke of freedom and joy, underpinned by harmonies that acknowledged past pain without being defined by it. As she played the final notes, allowing them to resonate and slowly fade away, the entire theater held its breath, then silence. Complete, perfect silence filled the grand space, a silence so profound it seemed almost holy. For several heartbeats, no one moved, no one coughed. No one even seemed to breathe. Then from somewhere in the back, a single person began to clap. Another joined, then another, until the entire audience was on its feet in a standing ovation that shook the rafters of the old theater. The applause went on, punctuated by cheers and whistles. Maya sat still at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She hadn't been able to see the audience's faces during her performance, but now she could hear their appreciation washing over her like a wave. A smile spread across her face as she stood and gave a small, humble bow. In the wings, Thelma was openly weeping. Mrs. Chen stood beside her, usually composed features now animated with fierce pride. And Victor Keller stood slightly apart, his expression unreadable as he watched Maya accept the adulation of the crowd. As Maya made her way off stage, guided by Claire, the applause continued. It took several minutes for the audience to settle down enough for the intermission to be announced. Backstage, Maya was immediately enveloped in her mother's embrace. "Baby, you were amazing," Thelma whispered fiercely. "Indeed she was," said a male voice with a slight European accent. Maya froze, instantly recognizing the voice. Victor Keller stood a few feet away, his hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Johnson," he said formally, "I owe you an apology." The backstage area fell silent, all eyes on this unexpected confrontation. "You were at my masterclass last year," Keller continued. "I said things that were unkind, untrue." Maya lifted her chin. "You said I couldn't understand music because I couldn't see the notes." Keller nodded, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I was wrong, profoundly wrong. What I heard tonight wasn't just technically accomplished, though it certainly was that. It was authentic. Musical understanding that goes far beyond notation." He stepped closer. "How did you do it? How did you develop so much in just a year?" "I had help," Maya said, gesturing toward Mrs. Chen. "From teachers who believed in finding new ways to learn, not just the traditional ones. And I stopped trying to play like everyone else. I found my own way." Keller was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that shocked everyone present. "Would you consider performing a duet with me this evening? As an encore after my set?" A murmur ran through the small crowd gathered backstage. Victor Keller was famous for his solo performances. He rarely played with others, considering it a distraction from his artistic vision. "A duet?" Maya repeated, stunned. "We haven't rehearsed anything." "We'll improvise," Keller said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Unless you don't feel comfortable with improvisation?" The challenge in his tone was gentle, almost teasing. Maya found herself smiling in response. "I'm quite comfortable with improvisation, Mr. Keller, are you?" Someone nearby stifled a laugh at her bold response. Keller himself chuckled. "Then it's settled," he said. "After my performance, we'll create something together." The second half of the concert passed in a blur for Maya. She sat in the audience next to her mother, listening as Victor Keller performed his program of Beethoven and Liszt with his usual technical brilliance. His playing was flawless, each note precisely where it should be, each phrase shaped with care. Yet as Maya listened, she noticed something she hadn't heard in the recordings she'd studied so intently. A certain carefulness, a holding back of emotional abandonment. When Keller finished his program to thunderous applause, he returned for an encore. Instead of sitting at the piano, however, he walked to the edge of the stage. "For my final piece tonight," he announced, "I've invited Miss Maya Johnson to join me. We haven't rehearsed. We haven't discussed what we'll play. We're going to create something in the moment together." A buzz of excitement ran through the audience as Maya was led back to the stage. A stagehand quickly brought out a second bench, positioning it so that Maya sat at one end of the piano keyboard while Keller sat at the other. "Ladies first," Keller said quietly. Maya nodded and began to play a simple, questioning melody in G minor. After a few measures, Keller joined in, adding harmonies that complemented her line while introducing a counter-melody of his own. Maya listened carefully, then responded to his musical idea, extending and developing it. What followed was an extraordinary musical conversation. They traded themes back and forth, sometimes playing together in perfect synchrony, other times taking solo passages while the other accompanied. Though they had never played together before, they seemed to anticipate each other's musical choices with an almost telepathic connection. The audience watched in amazement as the world-famous concert pianist and the unknown blind girl created something beautiful and spontaneous, each elevating the other's playing. Their improvisation lasted nearly 10 minutes, building to a climax that had both pianists using the full range of the keyboard, their hands occasionally crossing as they wove their musical lines together. When they finally brought the piece to a close, ending on a resolution so perfect it seemed planned, the audience erupted once again. This time Victor Keller took Maya's hand, helping her to stand as they accepted the applause together. "Thank you," he said to her quietly, beneath the roar of the crowd. "You've reminded me of something I had forgotten." "What's that?" Maya asked. "That music isn't created by the eyes," he replied. "It's created by the heart." 3 months later, Maya received a letter from the Keller Institute of Musical Arts, a new program established by Victor Keller himself, designed specifically for visually impaired musicians. The letter offered her a full scholarship, along with specialized training that would build on her unique abilities, rather than trying to force her into traditional methods. "The world of music is changing," the letter concluded in Keller's own words. "And you, Miss Johnson, are helping to change it. I would be honored to be part of your journey." Maya ran her fingers over the Braille version of the letter that had been included, a smile spreading across her face. She had found her path forward, not despite the obstacles placed in her way, but because of how she had learned to overcome them. Her journey was just beginning,